I was 19, sprawled on my best friend Jake's couch, the summer heat clinging to my skin like a second layer. The air was thick, the kind of sticky warmth that makes you feel restless, like something's about to happen. Jake's mom, Claire, walked into the room, carrying a glass of iced tea, her steps light but deliberate. She stopped, her eyes catching mine for just a second too long, and I felt this jolt, like I'd touched a live wire. "You've changed, Ryan," she said, her voice low, almost like she didn't mean for me to hear it. "In all the right ways." My stomach twisted, not just because of the words, but because of how she said them, like she'd been watching me, noticing things I hadn't even noticed about myself. Have you ever had someone say something that made your whole world tilt? Like suddenly you're not sure what's safe anymore? That's what that moment did to me. Claire was 42, radiant in a way that made you forget age, with this quiet confidence that pulled you in without trying. She was Jake's mom, for God's sake. My best friend's mom. The woman who'd made us pancakes when we were kids, who'd driven us to soccer practice, who'd bandaged my skinned knees and laughed at our dumb jokes. She'd always been, just there, part of the furniture of my life. But now I couldn't stop thinking about the way her eyes lingered, the way her smile felt like it held a secret meant only for me. I wanted to laugh it off, to chalk it up to the heat or my imagination, but my heart was racing, and not in the way it should have been. What do you do when someone you've known forever suddenly feels like a stranger? Not just any stranger, but one who sees you, really sees you, in a way that feels dangerous? I didn't know it then, but that one sentence, that one look, was about to unravel everything I thought I knew about myself, about her, about what lines you're never supposed to cross. Because once you notice something like that, there's no going back. You can try to ignore it, shove it down, pretend it's nothing, but it's there, whispering in the back of your mind, daring you to step closer to the edge. Have you ever felt that pull? That moment where you know you should walk away, but every part of you wants to stay, to see what happens if you don't? Let me take you back to that summer, to the beginning of it all. I was 19, fresh off my first year of college, feeling like I was finally becoming someone. Not a kid anymore, but not quite a man either, just stuck in that weird, messy in-between where you're trying to figure out who you are. Jake and I had been inseparable since we were 7, two scrawny kids building forts in his backyard, sneaking beers from his dad's fridge when we were 16, laughing until our sides hurt over nothing. His house was my second home, a place where I could walk in without knocking, where the fridge was always fair game, where the couch was practically molded to my shape from all the nights I'd crashed there. His mom, Claire, was always in the background of those memories. She was the kind of mom who didn't hover but always seemed to know when you needed something. A band-aid for a scraped knee, a snack when you were starving, a quiet word when you were sulking after a fight with your parents. She had this way of making you feel seen without making a big deal out of it, like she could read you without trying. Back then, I didn't think much of it. She was just Claire, part of the package deal of Jake's house, like the creaky stairs or the old dog that slept in the hallway. But that summer, something was different. I'd been away at college for a year, living in a dorm, figuring myself out, maybe growing into my own skin a little. I came back to Jake's house for a few weeks, crashing on their couch like I always did. Jake was the same as ever, loud, reckless, always dragging me into some half-baked plan, like stealing his neighbor's canoe for a midnight paddle or talking up a road trip we never actually take. But Claire? She was different. Or maybe I was the one who'd changed. She'd always been beautiful, but I'd never noticed it before, not like this. Her dark hair fell in loose waves, catching the light in a way that made you look twice. Her eyes, this deep hazel, seemed to catch every little thing, like she could see right through you. She moved with this quiet grace, like she knew exactly who she was, and when she looked at me, it wasn't the way she used to, like I was just her son's goofy friend who'd tracked mud through her house. It was heavier, like she was seeing someone new, someone I was only just starting to recognize myself. It started small, so small I could have brushed it off if I'd tried harder. Little moments that felt like nothing but stuck with me, replaying in my head at night when I was trying to sleep. She'd brush past me in the kitchen, her hand grazing my arm for a second longer than it needed to, sending this tiny spark through me that I didn't know what to do with. She'd ask me about college, about my classes, my plans, really listening, her head tilted like my answers mattered more than they should. One night, Jake was out with his girlfriend, and I was helping Claire clean up after dinner. Just the two of us, the house quiet except for the clink of dishes in the sink. She laughed at something I said, this low, warm sound that felt like it was just for me, and said, "You're not the kid I remember, Ryan." I laughed it off, tried to play it cool, but my chest felt tight, like I'd been caught doing something I shouldn't. Was she joking? Was I reading too much into it? I didn't know, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting, like the ground under me wasn't as solid as it used to be. Jake didn't notice a thing. He was too busy with his own life, talking about his girlfriend, planning that road trip we'd probably never take. But I started noticing everything, every glance, every smile, every time Claire's voice softened when she talked to me. It was like I was waking up to something I'd been blind to my whole life. And the worst part? I didn't want to stop. I wanted to lean into it, to see how far it could go, even though every rational part of me was screaming to shut it down. Have you ever been caught in a moment like that? Where you know it's wrong, but it feels so right you can't help but wonder what's on the other side? Where you're standing at the edge of something you can't quite name, and you're not sure if you want to step back or jump? A week into that summer, things got complicated. Jake's dad was away on a work trip, some conference that kept him gone for weeks, and Jake was spending most nights at his girlfriend's place, leaving the house quieter than usual. That left me and Claire alone more than I expected, more than I was ready for. At first, it was innocent, or at least I told myself it was. We'd watch old movies on the couch, trading dumb commentary about the cheesy dialogue. We'd talk about nothing important, her favorite books, my college dorm disasters, the time Jake and I got stuck in a tree trying to rescue a kite. But the air felt charged, like every word we said was carrying something heavier, something we weren't saying out loud. One night, we were sitting on the porch, the summer heat still clinging to the air, fireflies blinking in the yard. She handed me a glass of iced tea, her fingers brushing mine, and I swear I felt it in my bones, this tiny shock that made my breath catch. She sat closer than she needed to, her bare shoulder inches from mine, the hem of her sundress brushing her knee. "You've changed, Ryan," she said out of nowhere, her voice soft but deliberate, like she'd been holding the words back for a while. "In all the right ways." That's when it hit me like a punch to the chest. This wasn't just in my head. She was feeling it too, whatever this was. I tried to laugh it off, mumbling something stupid about working out at college, but my voice cracked, betraying me. She didn't laugh. She just looked at me, her eyes steady, like she was waiting for me to say something real, something that would break the silence we were both tiptoeing around. I didn't. I couldn't. My mind was a mess. Part of me wanted to bolt, to run out into the night and pretend this moment never happened, and part of me wanted to stay right there, frozen in that space where her words hung between us. I changed the subject, asked about her job, but the words felt hollow, like I was trying to fill a void that was only getting bigger. That night, I barely slept, replaying her words, her look, the way her voice seemed to wrap around me like a secret. Was she just being kind? Was I imagining the weight in her tone? Or was there something more, something neither of us was supposed to feel? I tossed and turned, the couch creaking under me, my mind racing with questions I didn't want to answer. Because if I answered them, I'd have to face what they meant. The next day, I tried to keep my distance, to act like nothing had changed. I hung out with Jake, played video games, laughed at his dumb jokes, tried to sink back into the rhythm of our friendship. But Claire was always there, in the corner of my vision, moving through the house like a quiet storm, her presence pulling at me. Every time she walked by, I felt it, a tug, like gravity, drawing me towards something I knew I shouldn't want. I started finding excuses to be around her, even though I told myself I was just being helpful. I'd offer to carry groceries, linger in the kitchen while she cooked, ask questions about her day that I didn't really care about, just to hear her voice. And she didn't pull away. She'd smile, tease me about being Mr. Helpful. But there was this edge to her tone, like she was testing the water, seeing how far I'd go, how far we'd go. It was like a game, but neither of us was sure of the rules, or if we even wanted to win. One evening, Jake was out again, probably at his girlfriend's, and Claire asked if I wanted to watch a movie. Just the two of us. My heart was pounding so hard I thought she'd hear it, but I said yes, trying to sound casual, like it was no big deal. We sat on the couch, a careful distance between us, some old rom-com flickering on the screen, the kind of movie Jake would have mocked endlessly. Halfway through, she turned to me, her face soft in the dim light, her hair falling over one shoulder. "You ever think about what you really want, Ryan?" she asked. Not like a casual question, but like she was digging for something deeper, something buried. I froze, my mouth dry, my mind scrambling for something safe to say. I wanted to be smooth, to keep this, whatever it was, under control, but all I could manage was, "Sometimes." "You?" She didn't answer right away. She just looked at me, her eyes searching mine, and said, "More than I should." Her words hit like a wave, pulling me under. I didn't know what to say, what to do. I just sat there, caught in her gaze, feeling like the world was shrinking to just the two of us. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't just a crush or some fleeting attraction. This was dangerous, a tightrope we were both walking without a net. She was Jake's mom. My best friend's mom. She was married, even if her husband was barely around, always off on some trip or buried in work. And I was 19, barely figuring out who I was, let alone what I wanted. But the way she looked at me, the way her words felt like they were meant only for me, it was like a door had opened, and I didn't know if I could stop myself from walking through it. Have you ever stood at the edge of something like that? Where one step could change everything, and you're not sure if you're brave enough, or stupid enough, to take it. I wasn't sure either, but I couldn't stop thinking about it, couldn't stop feeling the pull of her, like she was a magnet, and I was metal, helpless to resist. The days that followed were a blur of tension, each one tighter than the last. Every interaction with Claire felt laced with something unspoken, something that made my pulse race. A glance that lasted too long across the dinner table. A laugh that felt too personal, like it was meant just for me. A moment in the hallway where our hands brushed, and neither of us pulled away, letting the contact linger like a question neither of us dared to answer. I started questioning everything. Was I making this up? Was she just being friendly, and I was twisting it into something it wasn't? But then I'd catch her watching me, when I was helping in the yard, when I was joking with Jake, and her eyes would hold mine, just for a second, before she looked away. It was like we were both circling something neither of us could name, a fire we were both drawn to but afraid to touch. The worst part was Jake. He was my best friend, the guy who'd been there through every high and low, the guy who'd punched a bully for me in 6th grade, who'd stayed up all night when my parents split, just listening. If he had any idea what was going through my head, it would destroy him. It would destroy us. And Claire's husband? I barely saw him, but he was still there, a shadow in the back of my mind, reminding me that this could never be okay, that this wasn't just a line, it was a wall, and crossing it would mean breaking everything. Yet every time I tried to pull back, to put distance between me and Claire, she'd say something small, like, "You're good company, Ryan," in that soft, private tone, and it would pull me right back in, like a tide I couldn't fight. I was trapped, caught between guilt and want, between what I knew was right and what I couldn't stop feeling. Every day felt like a test, and I was failing it, over and over, because I didn't want to stop. It was the last week of summer, and the tension was suffocating, like the air itself was holding its breath. Jake's dad was due back soon, and Jake was talking about heading to the beach for a final blowout before I went back to college. I should have been excited, ready to soak up the last days of freedom, but all I could think about was Claire. Every moment with her felt like a countdown, like something was slipping away, and I didn't know if I wanted to hold on or let go. One night, Jake passed out early after a few too many beers, sprawled across his bed like a starfish. I found myself in the kitchen with Claire, washing dishes while she dried, the kind of normal, domestic moment that should have felt safe. But it didn't. The air between us was electric, every clink of a plate, every brush of her arm against mine, charged with something unspoken. She was talking about her life, how she'd wanted to be an artist once, how she'd had big dreams before marriage and kids and a mortgage took over. Her voice was soft, raw, like she was letting me see a piece of her she kept hidden from everyone else, even herself. "You ever feel like you missed your chance?" she asked, her hands still on a plate, her eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made my chest tighten. I didn't know how to answer. I was 19, I hadn't had enough chances to miss, not really. But I wanted to say something real, something that would keep her talking, keep her looking at me like that. "I think sometimes you don't know what you want until it's right in front of you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, my heart hammering so hard I was sure she could hear it. She didn't look away. She just nodded, slow and deliberate, like she understood exactly what I meant. And maybe she did. Maybe she was feeling the same pull, the same reckless curiosity, the same fear of what it meant. That night something shifted, like a lock clicking open. We started finding ways to be alone, not on purpose, not exactly, but it kept happening, like we were both drawn to the edge of something we couldn't name. A late-night talk on the porch, the stars bright above us, her voice soft as she told me about the places she'd always wanted to see. A walk to the corner store for ice cream, our shoulders brushing as we walked, the silence between us louder than words. A moment in the garage when she asked me to grab something from a high shelf, and her hand steadied my arm, lingering just long enough to make my breath catch, to make me wonder what would happen if I didn't pull away. Each moment was small, insignificant on its own, but they stacked up, building something neither of us could ignore, something that felt inevitable and impossible all at once. I started wondering what it would be like to cross that line, to say something, to do something, to let this thing between us become real. But every time I got close, the weight of it all crashed down. Jake, her husband, the life I'd always known, the life I'd lose if I let this go any further. It was like a rope tying me back, but it was fraying, and I wasn't sure how much longer it would hold. One afternoon, Claire asked me to help her move some boxes in the attic. Jake was out, as usual, probably at the arcade or his girlfriend's place, and the house was quiet, the kind of quiet that amplifies every sound, every breath. The attic was hot, dusty, filled with old photos and forgotten things, yearbooks, Christmas decorations, a cracked lamp that hadn't seen light in years. We worked in silence at first, sorting through boxes, the air thick with dust and something else, something heavier. Then she found a box of her old sketches, drawings she'd done in her 20s, full of color and life, bold lines and dreamy landscapes that felt like they belonged to someone else. She showed them to me, her voice soft with nostalgia, her fingers tracing the edges of the paper like she was touching a memory. "I used to think I'd be an artist," she said, her smile bittersweet. "I used to think I'd have this big, wild life." I saw a side of her I hadn't before, not Jake's mom, not a wife, but Claire, the woman who'd had dreams, who'd wanted more, who'd maybe lost pieces of herself along the way. "You remind me of who I used to be," she said, her eyes meeting mine, steady and unguarded. "Fearless. Like you could take on the world." I laughed, but it felt hollow, forced. Fearless? I was terrified, of her, of this, of the way my heart raced when she looked at me like that. That's when it happened. We were sitting on the attic floor, sketches spread out between us, the air heavy with dust and heat and something unspoken. Her hand brushed mine as she reached for another drawing, and this time, it wasn't an accident. She didn't pull away, and neither did I. For a moment, we just sat there, our fingers touching, the air thick with everything we weren't saying. My heart was pounding so loud I thought she'd hear it, thought it might give me away. I wanted to lean in, to close the distance, to see what would happen if I stopped fighting it, if I let myself fall into whatever this was. But then I heard Jake's car in the driveway, the low rumble cutting through the silence like a blade. The moment shattered, and we pulled apart, both of us pretending nothing had happened, busying ourselves with the boxes like we hadn't just been on the edge of something irreversible. But the air was different now, heavier, like we'd crossed a line we couldn't uncross, even if we hadn't said it out loud. The rest of the week was torture, every moment a reminder of how close we'd come, how close we still were. I couldn't look at Claire without feeling it, the pull, the guilt, the what-ifs that kept me up at night. She didn't bring it up, didn't mention the attic, but she didn't pull back either. She'd smile at me across the room, her eyes holding mine for a fraction too long. She asked me to stay for dinner, her voice light but deliberate, like she was inviting me to something more than a meal. And I let her. I wanted to be close, wanted to feel that spark again, even though every time I saw Jake, the guilt hit harder, like a fist to the gut. He was my best friend, the guy who'd always had my back. This was his mom. His mom. What the hell was I doing? Yet every time I tried to pull away, to put distance between me and Claire, she'd do something, say something, that made it impossible. "You're good for this house, Ryan," she said one night, her voice so soft it felt like a secret, like it was meant only for me. Good for the house? Or good for her? I didn't know, and I wasn't sure I wanted to. The last night of summer, Jake threw a party, the kind of chaotic, end-of-the-world bash that only happens when you know everything's about to change. The house was packed, music blaring, people laughing, bottles clinking, the air thick with sweat and cheap beer. I should have been in the thick of it, shotgunning beers with Jake, flirting with girls from high school, soaking up the last night of freedom. But I kept finding myself watching Claire. She moved through the crowd, playing the perfect host, refilling snacks, laughing with Jake's friends, her sundress catching the light as she moved. But every now and then, her eyes found mine, cutting through the noise like a laser. Each time, it felt like a question, a dare, a moment where the rest of the world fell away. I was leaving for college the next day, back to my dorm, my classes, my life. The weight of that was crushing me, pressing down on my chest. Would this, whatever it was, disappear when I left? Did I want it to? Did she? Late that night, when the party was winding down, the house quieter as people stumbled home or crashed on the floor, I found her in the kitchen, alone, washing glasses in the sink. The music was a low hum in the background, the air cool for the first time in weeks. I grabbed a towel to help, like it was nothing, like my hands weren't shaking, like my heart wasn't in my throat. She didn't say anything at first, just kept washing, the silence between us loud, heavy, like it was holding all the things we hadn't said. Finally, she looked at me, her eyes softer than I'd ever seen, like she was letting down a wall she'd been holding up all summer. "You're gonna do big things, Ryan," she said, her voice steady but laced with something else, regret maybe, or resolve. "Don't let anyone hold you back." It sounded like advice, the kind of thing a mom would say to her son's friend, but it felt like something else, like a goodbye, like she was letting me go, or letting herself go. I wanted to say something, to tell her how much she'd gotten under my skin, how I didn't know what to do with the way she made me feel, how I wasn't sure I wanted to leave without knowing what could have been. But I didn't. My throat was tight, my words stuck, so I just nodded, gripping the towel like it was the only thing keeping me grounded, and left the kitchen, the weight of her words following me out. The next morning, I packed my bags, shoving clothes into my duffel with more force than I needed. Jake was hungover, sprawled on the couch, complaining about the party and laughing about some girl who'd spilled beer on his shoes. Claire was there, in the kitchen, making coffee, smiling like always, but there was something in her eyes, regret, maybe, or relief, or something I couldn't name. I said goodbye to Jake, gave him a fist bump, promised to call when I got back to campus. Claire hugged me, quick and light, the kind of hug you give someone leaving for a weekend, not someone you'd almost crossed the line with. "Take care, Ryan," she said, her voice steady, her smile polite. And that was it. I walked out, got in my car, and drove back to college, the summer fading in my rearview mirror. Jake's still my best friend. We talk every week, play video games online, planned to meet up over breaks. Claire's still his mom, still in that house, still married. But sometimes, late at night, when the dorm is quiet and my mind won't settle, I think about that summer, about her words, her touch, the way her eyes saw me in a way no one else ever had. I wonder what might have happened if I'd been braver, or dumber. If I'd said something in that kitchen, if I'd leaned in the attic, if I'd let myself fall instead of pulling back. Have you ever had a moment like that? A what if that haunts you, that keeps you up at night, wondering what you left behind? Share it in the comments. I'd love to hear your story, to know I'm not the only one carrying something like this. And if this hit you, if you felt that pull, that ache, hit that subscribe button for more stories about the lines we're too afraid to cross, the moments that change us forever.